Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of my legislation, H.R. 5107, the Common Sense Law Enforcement and Accountability Now in D.C. Act, or affectionately known as the Clean D.C. Act for short, because that's what it is intended to do, and that is to clean up the city of Washington, D.C. My legislation, co-led with Senator Ted Cruz, repeals the anti-police provisions of the D.C. Council's so-called Comprehensive Policing and Justice Reform Emergency Amendment Act of 2022. If it's one thing that act doesn't do, it's create more justice. It creates injustice. The Clean D.C. Act is essential to restoring public safety in our nation's capital. For far too long, Washington, D.C., a city meant to embody freedom and prosperity, has been overwhelmed by violent crime. As millions of people visit D.C. every year, it is imperative that our nation's capital is safe for all residents and visitors. Yet in recent years, this simply has not been the case. In 2024, D.C.'s homicide rate exceeded 27 homicides per 100,000 residents, higher than that of any state, and nearly 3 times that of Islamabad, Pakistan, and 18 times that of communist-run Havana, Cuba. That same year, the city recorded nearly 30,000 crimes, including thousands of violent offenses, robberies, and car thefts. So far in 2025, D.C. has already seen over 2,200 violent crimes and more than 120 homicides, including the tragic killing of a 20-year-old Capitol Hill intern. That was an incredible tragedy. Of course, any homicide is an incredible tragedy, but that one really was. Despite these alarming trends, the radical D.C. City Council has chosen to undermine the very department responsible for protecting the city. Its anti-police law strips the Metropolitan Police Department officers of due process protections. It weakens collective bargaining. It restricts the use of non-lethal tools during civil unrest, and has fueled a devastating staffing collapse. Since the law took effect under emergency authority in 2020, the Metropolitan Police Department has lost over 2,000 officers, leaving the department critically understaffed and unable to adequately respond to this crisis. You know, one of my neighbors here where I reside in D.C. Had a terrible incident, a violent incident that happened to her with her child. And when the incident was over, she'd lost her pocketbook, she'd lost her phone. And when they called the MPD to come take a police report, the response was, you'll have to come down to the station because unless you're actually hurt yourself, okay, we don't have the officers to go out and actually go to you. You've got to come to us. That's just not right. That's an example of a completely understaffed police department. Thankfully, in August, President Trump initiated a federal takeover of the Metropolitan Police Department and deployed the National Guard to confront this massive crime crisis. Since then, violent crime has dropped by 30%. And even D.C.'s Democrat Mayor, Muriel Bowser, has acknowledged fewer homicides and a sharp decline in carjackings since President Trump's intervention. Repealing the anti-police policies enacted by the pro-criminal D.C. Council will further strengthen President Trump's efforts and restore common sense to law enforcement in Washington, D.C. Last Congress, in the 118th, I led a joint resolution of disapproval alongside then Senator J.D. Vance, now Vice President J.D. Vance, to repeal this same misguided D.C. Council law. The resolution passed both the House and the Senate with bipartisan majorities. Yet President Joe Biden foolishly vetoed our common sense measure, underscoring just how little the previous administration cared about the American people's safety and law enforcement officers' well-being. Thankfully, we now have new leadership in the White House, strong, forceful, America First leadership, and I look forward to sending this common sense legislation to President Trump's desk to restore law and order in our nation's capital and support our brave men and women in blue. Public safety should not be a partisan issue. It's just plain common sense. I urge all my colleagues to support H.R. 5107 so we can codify the progress we've made under the Trump administration and transform D.C. from a crime-ridden capital into a safe, free, and thriving city. And with that, I yield back.